Behind the barbed wire of Nazi camps, some SS guards crossed forbidden lines and paid dearly. From Josef Schillinger, who was brutally murdered by the same prisoner he molested, to Karl Koch, who was executed by Schutzstaffel, these are the tragic fates of SS guards who slept with Jewish women. Josef Schillinger. The case of Josef Schillinger is one of the most dramatic examples of resistance within the concentration camp system. Josef Schillinger served as an SS officer at Auschwitz, where his position of authority placed him in direct contact with female prisoners. Like many SS personnel, Schillinger used his power not just to implement the systematic murder of Jews, but to exploit and molest those under his control. Schillinger allegedly molested female inmates, using his position to force himself upon women who had no means of resistance or escape. In the upside-down moral universe of the concentration camps, molestation was just another tool of dehumanization, another way to strip prisoners of dignity and humanity before their eventual murder. Schillinger's story later took a very dramatic turn. According to historical accounts, he was killed by prisoner Francesca Mann during one of his molestation acts. Mann, facing certain death whether she resisted or not, chose to fight back against her attacker, delivering a form of justice that the official system would never provide. The killing of an SS officer by a Jewish prisoner was an unthinkable act of defiance within the camp system. Such resistance was extraordinarily rare, not because prisoners lacked courage, but because the consequences for any form of rebellion were swift and terrible, typically involving the execution of not just the resistant prisoner, but dozens or hundreds of others in retaliation. Francesca Mann's act of resistance has become legendary among Holocaust scholars and survivors, representing the unbreakable human spirit that persisted even in history's darkest moments. While Josef Schillinger's end came in a shocking act of resistance, this next person's story was filled with cruelty, plus rumors of secret relationships that eventually helped bring about his downfall. Gerhard Palitzsch. Among the SS personnel who exploited their positions for sexual molestation, few matched the systematic cruelty of Gerhard Palitzsch, whose sadistic behavior extended far beyond sexual violence to include every form of brutality the camp system allowed. Palitzsch served as SS Oberscharführer at Auschwitz, a position that granted him significant authority over prisoners and made him one of the most feared figures in the camp hierarchy. His reputation for sadistic behavior was well known among both prisoners and fellow SS personnel, marking him as exceptional even within a system designed for cruelty. The sexual exploitation of female inmates formed just one part of Palitzsch's broader pattern of terror. Like other SS guards who violated Nazi racial laws, he used his absolute power over Jewish women to force them into sexual relationships that often offered the illusion of protection in exchange for compliance. These were not connections or friendships in any meaningful sense, but rather acts of molestation disguised as consensual interaction. Palitzsch's behavior illustrates how the concentration camp system created opportunities for the worst human impulses to flourish unchecked. With no oversight, no accountability, and absolute power over life and death, guards like Palitzsch could indulge any sadistic fantasy while maintaining the facade of serving Nazi ideology. Although no specific documentation was left about Palitzsch's ultimate fate, it's known that many guards like him faced post-war trials for such atrocities. While Palitzsch used his power to harm and manipulate, this next SS official took his crimes even further. Karl Koch. The story of Karl Koch and his wife, Ilse Koch, represents one of the most notorious examples of corruption and depravity within the Nazi concentration camp system. It involved not just sexual molestation of Jewish prisoners, but a broader pattern of criminal behavior that ultimately led to their prosecution by the SS itself. Karl Koch served as commandant of Buchenwald concentration camp, a position that placed him at the apex of the camp's power structure. His tenure was marked not just by the systematic murder of prisoners, but by personal corruption, embezzlement, and molestation that eventually caught the attention of Nazi authorities themselves. Koch was known for murder, corruption, and sexual molestation of prisoners under his authority. The sexual acts he perpetrated involved not just Jewish women, but prisoners from various backgrounds who caught his attention or could be used to satisfy his appetites. His position as commandant meant that his word was absolute law within the camp, so this created opportunities for exploitation that even other SS personnel found excessive. Ilse Koch, his wife, became known as the Witch of Buchenwald for her own participation in the camp camp's brutalities. She also engaged in sexual perversion and molestations, sometimes involving Jewish prisoners. This made their household a center of depravity that shocked even hardened SS personnel. The Koch couple's behavior eventually became so excessive that they attracted the attention of SS investigators, who were concerned that their corruption was undermining camp efficiency and Nazi ideology. Karl Koch was ultimately executed by the SS for moral corruption, making him one of the few concentration camp commanders to face execution by his own side. His death was motivated not by concern for his victims, but by his violation of SS codes regarding personal enrichment and unauthorized violence. Ilse Koch, on the other hand, survived the war and faced post-war trials, where she was convicted for her crimes and sentenced to prison. Her case became one of the most publicized examples of female Nazi perpetrators, though her eventual suicide in prison prevented her from serving her full sentence. Koch's actions shocked even his fellow Nazis, but this next person, though a doctor, used medicine as a weapon and was accused of far more than just experiments. Eduard Wirtz. Among the medical personnel who participated in Nazi atrocities, few cases illustrate the misuse of professional authority as clearly as that of Eduard Wirtz, who used his position as a doctor to exploit Jewish women under the guise of medical treatment. Wirtz served as an SS doctor at Auschwitz. Here, the medical staff played a crucial role not just in selections for death, but in conducting horrific experiments on prisoners. His position as a physician granted him unique access to female prisoners and the authority to conduct examinations without oversight or accountability. The allegations against Wirtz center on his use of medical examinations as a pretext for sexual molestation, and the female prisoners, already weakened by starvation and torture, had no choice but to comply when ordered to report for medical examination. Wirtz allegedly had sexual relations with Jewish women under the pretense of medical examinations, transforming what should have been healing encounters into opportunities for further victimization. He was expected to heal and protect, but instead he became an instrument of torture and exploitation, using his medical knowledge to inflict suffering rather than alleviate it. Sadly, while there were prisoners who experienced Wirtz's horrific acts, the post-war reckoning for his crimes was complicated because of a lack of evidence. Like Wirtz, several other doctors who also participated in sexual molestation escaped specific prosecution for their crimes even when they faced justice for other offenses. A good example is this next SS official, Dr. Karl Klauberg. The intersection of medical authority and sexual violence reached its most horrific expression in the work of Dr. Karl Klauberg, who used sterilization experiments for both genocidal and sexual molestation purposes. Klauberg conducted forced sterilization experiments at Auschwitz. This was in service of Nazi population policies that were designed to prevent Jewish reproduction. However, while his role was clear, these experiments served multiple purposes beyond their stated scientific goals, creating opportunities for sexual molestations disguised as medical research. The experiments conducted by Klauberg involved injecting various substances into women's reproductive systems, causing excruciating pain, permanent damage, and often death. The procedures were conducted without anesthesia, without consent, and with complete disregard for the suffering they caused. Many of these procedures involved sexual acts under the guise of science, as Klauberg used his authority to conduct unnecessary examinations and procedures that served his personal desires rather than any legitimate research purpose. The women subjected to Klauberg's experiments were chosen not for scientific reasons, but often based on their youth, attractiveness, or availability. It's said that Klauberg and his assistants evaluated female prisoners based on criteria that had nothing to do with legitimate medical research. For a lot of women, the psychological impact of Klauberg's experiments extended far beyond their physical effects. Women who survived his procedures carried not just physical scars, but the knowledge that their bodies had been violated in the name of science. Sadly, while Klauberg's crimes were horrible, post-war efforts to prosecute him were complicated by his death before trial, preventing full accountability for his crimes. Klauberg's experiments caused lasting pain, but this next person made sure the pain never ended. Rudolf Höss. As commandant of Auschwitz, Rudolf Höss oversaw the murder of over 1 million people and became one of the most infamous figures in Holocaust history. While his role in systematic genocide is well documented, rumors about his personal conduct toward female prisoners illustrate the broader pattern of sexual molestation that characterized concentration camp leadership. Höss served as commandant of Auschwitz from 1940 to 1945, during which time the camp evolved from a prison for Polish political prisoners into the largest killing center in human history. His position position placed him at the apex of the camp's power structure, with authority over both prisoners and guards that was virtually absolute. Though not definitively proven, rumors circulated about the sexual molestation of female inmates under Höss's authority. The significance of these rumors lies not just in their specific allegations, but in what they reveal about the atmosphere Höss created at Auschwitz. His leadership style encouraged the worst impulses among his subordinates, creating an environment where sexual molestation was not just tolerated, but implicitly sanctioned through his failure to prevent or punish such behavior. Even Höss's own writings and testimony reveal a man who viewed Jewish prisoners as less than human, making it psychologically easier for him to justify or ignore sexual molestation by his subordinates. While Höss ran Auschwitz with cold efficiency, this next person carried that cruelty from one camp to another until justice caught up with him. Fritz Hartjenstein. The story of Fritz Hartjenstein shows how SS personnel could carry patterns of sexual exploitation from one camp to another, spreading molestation throughout the concentration camp system. Hartjenstein served as commandant at both Birkenau and later Natzweiler concentration camps, positions that granted him supreme authority over thousands of prisoners. His multiple commands allowed him to refine his methods of control and exploitation, developing systems of violence that he could implement across different camp environments. The accusations of sexual exploitation against Hartjenstein involved female prisoners at multiple camps, suggesting that his behavior was not situational but represented a consistent pattern of conduct throughout his SS career. Hartjenstein's ability to maintain his position despite engaging in sexual exploitation of prisoners reveals the high level of tolerance for such behavior within the SS hierarchy. As long as commanders maintained camp efficiency and met their quotas for murder and labor extraction, personal misconduct was often overlooked or ignored by superiors. Commanders like Hartjenstein didn't just molest women, they created systems that encouraged their subordinates to carry out such acts as well. In the end, Hartjenstein was captured by British forces. On June 6, 1946, he was sentenced to life in prison at Wuppertal for the execution of 4 female agents from the British Special Operations Executive. He was later tried again, this time for the hanging of a Royal Air Force prisoner of war, and received a death sentence. Following this, Hartjenstein was extradited to France, where he faced trial for his crimes at the Natzweiler concentration camp and was once more sentenced to death. However, before the sentence could be carried out, he died of a heart attack on October 20, 1954, in Paris at the age of 49. While Hartjenstein's actions were calculated, this next person's actions were personal. Franz Wunsch. In 1942, 20-year-old Helena Citronova, a Jewish prisoner, encountered Franz Wunsch in Auschwitz. Wunsch was an SS guard responsible for overseeing the very gas chambers that claimed countless Jewish lives. According to a 2021 article, their relationship began in 1942, when Helena, then 20, was forced to sing at Wunsch's birthday celebration. She was young, stripped of everything, and forced to perform for the entertainment of her captors. Wunsch, struck by her performance, developed an affection for Helena, and this led to a complex relationship. Helena was assigned to work in the Canada warehouse, sorting the belongings of murdered Jews, a position some claimed was given to her due to Wunsch's influence. The Canada warehouse was where prisoners sorted through the possessions of those who had been murdered, things like watches, jewelry, photographs, and even personal mementos. Wunsch's protection extended beyond mere job assignments. In one of the most heart-wrenching aspects of their story, this relationship offered Helena some protection, including saving her sister from the gas chambers, though her sister's children could not be saved. Imagine the impossible choices, the partial victories that felt like defeats, saving one family member while losing others to the machinery of death that Wunsch himself operated. The post-war reckoning for Franz Wunsch was swift and severe. Wunsch faced post-war trials in Austria for his role in the Holocaust. He was charged with shooting Jewish prisoners and inserting poison gas into chambers. The very hands that may have shown tenderness to Helena were the same hands that had fed Zyklon B into gas chambers, ending thousands of lives. Wunsch's actions as an SS guard were brutal, and the relationship with Helena did not absolve him of his crimes. While there were SS guards who molested women, there were others who were more renowned for their cruelty. Elfriede Rinkel. The story of Elfriede Rinkel represents not just wartime misconduct, but the long shadow that such secrets can cast over one's entire lifetime. At Ravensbrück, the largest concentration camp for women in the Nazi Reich, Rinkel used an SS-trained dog to control prisoners. It was a brutal method with which the Nazi system operated even in its final desperate months. Elfriede's story truly began not during the war, but in its aftermath. She hid her past after emigrating to the United States in 1959. Like thousands of other former Nazis, Nazis, she reinvented herself in America, crafting a new identity built upon the burial of her dark past. This American dream, for Elfriede, was predicated on the most profound form of deception. She married Fred Rinkel, a German Jewish Holocaust survivor, without disclosing her role as a guard. Consider the magnitude of this deception. A former SS guard, trained to view Jews as subhuman, living in intimate daily contact with a Holocaust survivor, sharing meals, sharing a bed, sharing a life built upon a lie so fundamental it defied comprehension. Fred Rinkel, unaware of his wife's history, was an active member of Jewish organizations, making the revelation particularly shocking to their community. For decades, Elfriede attended synagogue services, participated in Jewish community events, and listened to Holocaust remembrance ceremonies, all while harboring the secret of her participation in the very system being mourned and condemned. Eventually, her identity was uncovered, and this eventual discovery was as dramatic as it was devastating. Elfriede's past was revealed in 2006, leading to her deportation from San Francisco to Germany at age 84. Picture it, an elderly woman, having lived nearly half a century as a respected member of her community, suddenly exposed as a former Nazi guard. Although the statute of limitations prevented criminal charges, her case highlights the secrecy and shame surrounding such relationships. Just Rinkel, this next SS officer, also lost something valuable. Werner Vetter. Not all stories of relationships between Nazis and Jews occurred within concentration camps. Some unfolded in the broader German society, where Jewish women struggled to survive by hiding their identities. The story of Werner Vetter and Edith Hahn-Beer is one of the most remarkable tales of survival through deception and unexpected protection. Werner Vetter, a Nazi party member and officer, married Edith Hahn, an Austrian Jewish woman hiding her identity, in 1943. Edith was a law student who was forced out of university after the Anschluss. She later went on to work as a Red Cross nurse in Munich under false papers. The relationship between Werner and Edith was built upon the most dangerous truth imaginable in Nazi Germany. Despite Edith's confession of her Jewish identity, Vetter married her and kept her secret, even during her pregnancy with their daughter Angelika, who was born in 1944. According to reports, the daily reality of their marriage was marked by constant terror and fear of discovery. It's said that Edith even avoided painkillers during childbirth to avoid revealing her identity. As the war ended, the situation got worse. Vetter was captured by the Soviets in 1945 and sent to a labor camp, although he was later released in 1947. Their marriage ended shortly after his release. Edith reclaimed her Jewish identity post-war and served as a judge in Brandenburg. She emigrated to Israel and later lived in London, dying in 2009. While Vetter's case was not as terrible as other SS guards, he still lost something dear to him because of his past. While Vetter's life was shaped by fear and silence, this next person used her position to become one of the most feared women in the camps. Irma Grese. Irma Grese was a young SS guard at Ravensbrück, Auschwitz-Birkenau, and Bergen-Belsen. She became infamous for her cruelty. Even survivors called her the hyena of Auschwitz. Grese participated in prisoner selections. She used whips, commanded dogs to attack inmates, and even displayed intense sadistic pleasure in her violence. Survivor Olga Lengyel recalled that Grese often had sexual interactions with both SS staff and female prisoners. These were not consensual relationships but sadistic acts. According to some victims, Grese allegedly kept favorite prisoners only to later send them to the gas chambers when she grew bored. Gisela Pearl, a survivor and prisoner doctor, documented the sickness and brutality Grese inflicted. Pearl noted that Grese seemed to become physically aroused when torturing young women, particularly during operations which she forced them to perform without anesthesia. Grese would even kick the woman undergoing an operation if her screams got in the way of Grese's arousal. In the end, Grese was convicted at the Belsen trial in 1945 for murder and ill treatment and was executed at age 22. She was the youngest woman to die under British law in the 20th century, and her execution marked the end of a brief but horrifically violent career that had destroyed countless lives. During the Belsen trials, Grese showed no remorse. Instead, she maintained Nazi ideology right until her execution, even singing Nazi songs in her cell. Grese's so-called relationships were manifestations of extreme power and sexual sadism, and her brutality stands as a horrifying example of sexual violence weaponized by a position of absolute power. Just like Grese, this next person also gave orders with deadly consequences. Maria Mandl. Among female SS guards, few matched the systematic cruelty of Maria Mandl. Her nickname, the Beast, reflected her capacity for orchestrating mass murder while maintaining the facade of cultural refinement that made her crimes all the more chilling. Maria Mandl was a senior female SS guard at Auschwitz, responsible for over 500,000 deaths of female prisoners. Her position as a senior guard placed her at the heart of the camp's killing system, where she wielded life and death authority over thousands of women and children. She oversaw roll calls, punishments, and selections for gas chambers. She even created the Women's Orchestra of Auschwitz. This orchestra that Mandl created served multiple psychological functions within the camp system. It provided entertainment for guards, created the illusion of normalcy and culture within a place designed for death. It also offered a cruel form of psychological torture for prisoners who were forced to provide beautiful music while their fellow inmates were murdered around them. Although there was no direct evidence of her engaging in sexual relationships with Jewish prisoners, Mandl's role in the camp's brutal environment and her authority over female prisoners placed her in a position where such molestations could occur. Mandl was eventually executed in 1948 after conviction at the Auschwitz trial. Her trial and execution represented one of the few cases where female perpetrators faced full accountability for their crimes, though this came far too late for the hundreds of thousands who had died under her authority. Just like Mandl, this next person also perpetrated some horrible acts. Herta Bothe. The story of Herta Bothe illustrates how female SS guards could participate in sexual exploitation while also demonstrating the long-term consequences that some perpetrators faced for their wartime actions. Known as the sadist of Stutthof, Bothe was a tall, brutal guard involved in death marches and beatings. Her physical presence and willingness to engage in violence made her one of the most feared guards at multiple camps, including Ravensbrück, Stutthof, and Bergen-Belsen. Although no specific evidence links her to relationships with Jewish women, her position of authority over female prisoners placed her in situations where sexual exploitation could easily occur. What makes Bothe's case particularly notable is her post-war survival and eventual willingness to speak about her experiences. She spoke publicly in a 1999 interview, showing no remorse, revealing an unrepentant attitude that shocked those who encountered her decades after the war's end. Bothe was jailed for her violent acts, and while she was later pardoned by the British after a few years, she eventually died in 2000. It's said that the relatively light punishment and long post-war survival that Bothe faced stand in stark contrast to the suffering she inflicted. While Bothe was brutal, our actions were nothing compared to what this next person did. Elisabeth Volkenrath. As one of the highest-ranking female SS personnel, Elisabeth Volkenrath's story illustrates how women could achieve significant authority within the concentration camp system and use that power to facilitate evil. As chief female overseer at Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen, Volkenrath was known for her cruelty. Her high-ranking position placed her in charge of other female guards and gave her authority over thousands of female prisoners across multiple camp systems. Although no direct evidence suggests she had relationships with Jewish women, Volkenrath's high-ranking role in female camps reportedly established the culture and practices that governed how female guards interacted with prisoners. Volkenrath's authority meant that she could have prevented sexual molestation by her subordinates, or conversely, could have encouraged or facilitated such behavior through her policies and example. As evidence suggests, she chose the latter path, creating an environment where molestation was tolerated and even encouraged. This institutional dimension makes her case particularly significant for understanding how sexual violence became embedded in concentration camp operations. In the end, Volkenrath was sentenced to death in 1945 at the Belsen trial. Her case was one of the few where female SS personnel faced the ultimate penalty for their crimes. While Volkenrath met justice like many others, this next person tried to evade justice. Ruth Closius. Ruth Closius's case and her story at Ravensbrück concentration camp represent the extreme end of female SS brutality and the occasional instances where post-war justice was swift and decisive. Closius was sentenced to death for her exceptional cruelty at Ravensbrück. Under her watch, Ravensbrück, then the largest concentration camp designed specifically for women, became a laboratory for the most refined forms of gendered violence and exploitation that the Nazi system could devise. Like other female guards, no specific evidence confirms relationships relationships with Jewish women, but her role in a camp with many Jewish prisoners suggests she encouraged such habits. Closius's position at Ravensbrück placed her at the center of a camp system that was designed to exploit every aspect of female vulnerability. Originally, the camp's infrastructure, policies, and daily operations were already designed to maximize the suffering of women prisoners, and guards like Closius were the instruments through which this suffering was inflicted. Closius was executed post-war for her crimes, and her case represented one of the relatively few cases where female SS personnel faced the ultimate penalty for their participation in the Holocaust. Her execution served as a form of justice for the countless women who had suffered under her authority. Which of these cases do you find most horrifying? Let me know in the comments below. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, click on this next card on your screen.